I'll introduce myself, and as I do, I'm here just to share with the waters. Many people in Turtle Island or Canada know Banff Center, and the waters here are Minhe Pa. And Daryl Kootenay, one of the youth leaders here, was telling us his living history yesterday. And he said, we used to say Minhe like this because it sounds like the buffalo. And he talked about the language, and it was really, really quite beautiful. So as I introduce myself, I just wanted to invite people just to maybe connect to where you come from outside of the waters, your ancestors, land, maybe places you visited, and the spirit of kinship. I'm just going to say hello in the ways where I come from. Bojo, Tansei, Gijagate, Indigenous, Atupimizuwak, Cree, Métis, Icelandic Isles, Kwendau, Benesi Okaninasing Donjaba, Akikwe Donji. So I introduced myself. I grew up in the lands of the Anishinaabe people, or Anishinaabe-speaking lands. Today is on Ontario in Canada, and in waters on the map that appears as Skeleton Lake or Benesi Okaninasing. And so sometimes even the language that we use in connecting to place opens up and allows us to tap into the essence of kinship or all my relations. And so we were talking yesterday about continuing to unbundle language, and the language and the images that we use really matter. As we know, I think Richard Wagamese, in one of his really beautiful books around the embers, when we talk about the fire, he talked about the essence of ritual, or the essence of coming together. It's not to accumulate knowledge. It's actually to continue to embody it and bring it alive through our experience. I know Melanie Goodchild in Australia, they talk about yarning and the importance of having conversations to keep this essence alive, because in ways that we grow up, it can stay in the frontal lobe. And when it comes alive in all of the different places we come from, then we actually move in a way that connects and nurtures kinship through time and space. All of our ancestors with all of life. And so even when you see this beautiful image of the turtle, and on the turtle's back, Sita and I would always talk about the nature of the sound and how that impacts the development of the turtle in water. And you can start, naturally it's showing the essence and the natural law of all my relations. And so we're talking about community and tapping into the essence. I know that was it's one of those things you can't really speak directly to, but be in relationship to, and allow that to be something that's alive and moving, or we might use the word a verb. It's not something, it's something that continues to move within us. So I know for me, being here in these lands, one of the things that Elder Tom Cranberry would talk about when we go out into the land, those natural laws, if we want to talk about kinship or all my relations, they come alive in us. So finding ways to nurture that in community and spaces. Even here, I think the network and this festival has done such a beautiful job in welcoming us in, as well as the imagery and the different elements. So yeah, we're grateful to be in conversation about the spirit of kinship, and just want to give thanks for all the directions that we're coming into today. For us at home too, it embodies the spirit of our prophecies. It embodies the spirit of the time we're in a way that nurtures us and allows us to belong to a greater story during our time. And so we can see our kinship field expanding, maybe beyond what our ancestors knew, but leading us towards where we're going collectively. So with that, I just wanted to share a little bit, mysteriously with my name, that there was a Bowajagawan Dream Drum Society. And so it's an Anishinaabe drum society we're bringing back at home within Feather Carriers. And just very quickly, it's a two-sided drum, which is a little bit different. And we're all, of course, woven, but we talked about when we come with a vision. And so similar to wayfinding, it's a call and response to the vision that we're carrying. And so we're going to move now into our breakouts and to tap into that tapestry about the essence of community and the meaning of community, to have some conversations. So I think I'll just play for maybe a minute here. I'll continue to play as you move into your breakouts together, but grateful to be with everyone, and so looking forward to our conversation.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a nice conversation. We had a great conversation. I'm Sita, and And we're going to just take a little bit of time here to do some sharing. So would welcome anyone who has some reflections that really resonated with them in their group to use the raise hand function. And just be mindful that we have a lot of people here and we want to weave as many voices together as possible. So share headlines, not paragraphs. Anyone have something that they want to share? Yes, Grace.
Yeah, I mean, we all have very different ideas of what a community is. But one thought that we had that I think was interesting, like, is this idea of like how much uniformity do you need? And like in some groups, there's like a certain whatever you might call it, like ethos or ideology or vibe that you have to have, or maybe even a belief system. And in other groups, there's more room for self-expression and acceptance. Like there's a very different, like depending on what you come around together on, your community may have more or less tolerance for differences of opinion and like how to hold that in community. Like what if I don't believe all the same things as everybody else in the community, which is the case 100% of the time, and then how does community hold differences? So that was a theme that came up.
Beautiful. Jose.
Yeah, emerge some words like a sense of belonging, like trust, like care. So these, I think, are very important words to consider a community as a key aspects and values to consider a community. And were an interesting initial question from Michelle, that is, if we can consider communities from the perspective of to be special or unique or something like that.
Beautiful, thank you. Mike.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am inspired by Daniel Pink's approach on intrinsic motivation. So the first one, I realized there's a shared higher purpose. It's not about me, it's a purpose that is bigger than myself. So that's one. Second, there is a complementary skill sets. I'm good at A, you're good at B, you're good at C. So all of us can work together to support the higher purpose of this community. Second. The third, there's an agile-like framework that enable people to contribute in any manner that they would like, in terms of intensity, in terms of time, in terms of frequency, that everybody contributes a bit and all of them builds up to expand or advance the community together.
Thank you, Mike. Care to?
Thank you. I think we were pretty aligned in our group. And we discussed community being a sense of belonging, hospitality, generosity, responsibility of stewarding was something that was mentioned, and being held and also holding. And then the other aspect we discussed the communities going beyond sort of the human and bringing in the whole living world. Yeah, is also something we discussed. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. Michelle.
After we all said a little bit about what we thought community was, it made me realize that we were talking about the ideal community, and something that it made me wonder is, what is the place of exclusion in community building? And I know that's an uncomfortable question, but if we include everything, how does it stay together and contain? And how, like, what is the function of exclusion? It just left me with a question, and maybe that's where we're going next.
Yeah. So I think the thing that I wanted to bring to the big group, it's that in our group we talk about the international communities, that's so big, that say we might not know everyone, and it's not really like an agenda, like a, say out of hosting or service-based communities I've been part of. But because we share the same practices, the same value, the same supposedly higher purpose, wherever we go in the world, we feel that sense of being welcomed by people that we don't necessarily know. So that expands the concept of community for me, as like something very immediate, something that you actually cultivate, Yeah.
Beautiful. Anyone else have anything they want to share before we move on? I'm going to ask you to hold all of those ideas and questions as we continue in this journey today on our Zoom call.
I'm not sure if Lynn is back. I also saw that Erin was unmuting herself, so maybe she also had a reflection to maybe close this part, or.
Well, Maria left us with such a beautiful question as we were exiting. So I was just, it was still with me when Sita was asking. So I'm not quite sure where Lynn is. But yeah, Maria, if you don't mind, you talked about the name itself, and holding the name of community, and just the different types of names. So just wanted to center that, because it was a beautiful question.
And I can share that in our group, we had some beautiful reflections on the dynamism and livingness of community. And I think Raluca said, we give birth to community and it changes as we change, which I thought was a beautiful reflection. Michelle.
Yeah, this wasn't my reflection, but someone in my group just, just from listening very intentionally, I arrived to the reflection of the fact that community is work. You don't just stumble upon it and or just stay within within the first 20 people that are surrounding you physically. Community takes work and intentionality and agency and time, of course, and that is really interesting because it's for so many people in the world, it's just what comes to you and you just don't make an effort, but it actually gives you a lot of power over who you want to be in community with or which communities you want to build.
Beautiful. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Sudha.
I'm curious if you had anything you want to share, and also welcome you into the next exercise if you'd like to
Yes.
help us play.
Yes, thank you, Sudha. And with a lot of resonance from our collective sharings, I invite you to some embodiment exercise. It's going to be short, 5 minutes, but I guess since we have sit down for about 4 to 5 minutes, it's a good idea to stand up and freshen a little bit. So feel free to turn off your camera. It gives you better freedom to move. We're about to explore how the 5 elements would resonate in the body level. So it could be something very literal. It could be something more subtle, like the feeling. I'm going to leave it to you for your own exploration. I'm just going to throw in some guidance. This is going to be a very, very brief invitation, but I hope that it will open up more time, your personal time, to explore what does it mean for me to embrace the fire, the circles, the rhythm, the spiral, and the net. So we're gonna start with grounding ourselves. Think of it as gathering woods to have this fire burning. And by taking deep breaths in and send it all the way down to your feet, feel that connection, firmly planted feet on the ground. That's how we'll start. And I invite you to explore the first element, the fire. You can put one hand on your heart. In traditional Chinese medicine, heart is associated with the element of fire. And within the next minute or so, explore what it feels like. What is your fire for yourself? What is this fire for your community? You can feel the sensation starting to run into other parts of the body, as if the circles are activating. Maybe it's the tingling sensations in your palms or fingers. Maybe you're realizing that you are swaying even as you are standing still. And as you feel your sway, we'll tap into the circle for a moment here. So notice when you make circles, and you feel free to make small ones, big ones, maybe drawing circles with your elbows, even your armpits, activating those, like, I would say, further away circles that you normally don't reach. So getting a bit of movement here. And feel how that circles move other parts of the body. And naturally, as you circle, you're also realizing that you're spiraling. So we'll shift our attention to the spine, the column of life. And there's so much that I can share about spine, but for this short minute, feeling the way in and way out as you spiral. Movement coming in, expanding all your limbs, and then contracting, starting from the spine. Contracting. And with all of that, notice your rhythm. Do you feel called to follow a certain rhythm? Or maybe your rhythm is rather spontaneous, with the circles in the spiral of the spine. We'll have one more minute here. So feel free to explore. Maybe you can focus on one element to really get a deeper feeling, understanding, embodied sensation. Maybe for the last few seconds, we could explore a more rapid rhythm. just to activate things before we come back to our shared space with groundedness of the chair. What will be the last few movements, rhythm, circles, spirals you would like to feel in your body? And finally coming back to the ground, find a way to stand still with your palms open and sense for that tingling sensations, that resonance of the dance. And knowing that everything, every parts of the body connected by networks of bones, of muscles, fascias, that's tiny little network that encompasses, that connects every single parts, organs in the body. Blood vessels, water's flowing. Feel your body as a whole, as the you community, knowing there are organisms, flora, bacteria, many, many, many cells that form this community that you call myself, my body. And we will softly end this with palms together and maybe show some appreciation, bowing to yourself, or maybe rub the palms. And we get a bit of eye massage. Put your heated palm over your eyes. And gently flap your eyes open in your palms. And whenever you're ready, I invite you to come back to our net, the greater networks of these amazing humans of many, many amazing communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. That was awesome, and that was very special. We've been working together now for many years and working on these elements, and we've never had an embodied moment of those 5 elements. So that is definitely a first. It's awesome. Michelle, could I invite you to bring up the slides? What we're going to do now is just to look a little bit deeper into the work of the framework, just to look at like what are some of the essences there. And we'll go through it and then come into another conversation. Before I start, I just want to quickly like just speak again to the who that we're very lucky today that we have so many people here who helped to co-create this. You already heard some of the voices with Erin and Sita and Michelle and Lynn. And I mentioned this briefly in the chat, but actually a lot of the beautiful drawings that are here were made by Lynn and our colleague Alfredo, who can't be with us today. So also a very important part. And I have the chance, there's many actually powerful Michelles on this call today. And I'm very grateful that to have Michelle Arevalo with me, who has been guiding us and supporting us and walking with us now for many years, as we're gonna like look at this framework together. I also feel called. Oh yeah, Michelle. Hi.
Hi. Just wanted to say hi, everyone.
So nice to have you, and so nice to hear your voice. Lynn's playfulness reminded me of two essences with this work. And I just wanted to bring them back into the center. One is one of gift, which is that our intention with this was to create a gift, to create something that hopefully could be used by many other people. And seeing also the gifts that so many of you carry, we see that so many of you do really beautiful community weaving work, and so many of you give that gift to so many others. And we wanted to honor you all, and we wanted to share a little bit something with you to uplift you and to strengthen you. And that is a very, very important part of this. And if nothing else, we get to say thank you today and to say we appreciate all the work that you all do. That is really, like, I would say, the very essence of this. And the second is around the playfulness. This is a framework, but it is really just one way to play in a universal sandcastle. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's many ways how you can like build things, and there's infinite ways of creating community. So take this as a playful invitation, as a way to experiment and see what fits, but don't take it too seriously and don't take it too literally. You know, this is really just an invitation, and see what, because many of you carry actually a lot of knowledges and wisdom around community. So don't let that overshadow what you have inside of you. Having said that, so there's 5 elements to this that we've identified, and the question we came together on was like, how do we not just create community, but how do we weave healthy communities? And the 2 key words there are weaving and healthy, where we felt that tradition before with the community canvas, we had talked a lot about building community. Yet we felt like community is a living, breathing, evolving set of relationships. It can't be built, but maybe it can be woven. We thought that was a beautiful metaphor that we wanted to also center. And the second element, we were interested, what doesn't just create community, what makes it healthy? And so what we wanted to put in the middle are 5 patterns that we've seen. And each of these patterns is an invitation for you to come into conversation with your group, to see like, what does this maybe mean for us? You already heard them: the fire, the web, the rhythm, the circles, and the spiral. We'll quickly go through each one of them, and I have the luck that Michelle will be like walking with me and actually bring her own experience and perspective on this. Michelle, is there anything you want to add before we dive into the element?
No, not really. Let's get right into it. Happy to be sharing. Just yes.
Lovely. And if anyone of the team feels called to add anything at any time, please just step in. All right. Then Michelle B, could you go to the next slide? The fire. At the center of a healthy community, we see a healthy fire. It's a source of warmth. It's a source of light. It's a source of energy. It's a source of strength, and it's a source of possibility. It's something that draws us in, that gives us guidance, that we see from the distance, that we can feel, and that we orient ourselves around. It's our shared sense of identity, our sense of values, our sense of togetherness and belonging. So the question is like, what is the fire for your community? And the question that we've been thinking a lot around there is like, what is it that brings us together? And in particular, we're thinking about 4 elements. I'm sure there's many more. Why do we come together? What's our purpose? Where do we come together? Where do we come from? Where do we belong? How do we come together? And like, what are our principles? Like, what do we stand for? What do we value? And then who are we? Who is this really for? Michelle, how has the fire shown up for you in your life, in your experience?
In so many ways. And I think that's one of the things that I love about the elements, because you can really actually be playful with the concept, right? I think that that the most important thing about the fire is that, you know, you're in a dark place and the fire starts burning, you just immediately know where it is. Whether you can see it or whether you can smell it or where you can feel the heat, you just know that it's there, right? And in some other communities, or like things that are starting to become communities and the fire is just not there for you, then you know it's just not there. But in my case, actually, I was thinking about just a really good example of something that came up from a past life I had. I used to work with refugees and here in Ecuador, Colombian refugees, and sometimes and then later in Thailand and Tanzania, and we had a lot of colleagues that worked with what we called South to South refugees, which at that point was very much the norm, but not the norm in the global sense of the word. Most often, you know, you would have legal aid for refugees happening in the northern countries, and it was very, you know, very advanced, very intrinsic, very much rights driven. And we all started feeling like, okay, maybe we have something in common. So it started maybe with a spark, you know, by just all of us having drinks, you know, around, I think, Geneva, where we all met up maybe once a year. And it started raging a little bit more. And the more we realized that if taken separately, we were really just kind of like a footnote in the history of what refugee rights looked like. But together we were so much more powerful, and it was just very powerful to show up together as Southern refugee legal aid offerers, and this really became a very clear fire once we realized that beyond just sharing knowledge or maybe supporting each other, what we wanted to do is advocate for better conditions and better rights-based conditions for the refugees that we served in the global South. And I know that fire is still there. Like, it's been ages, maybe 15, 16 years since I've seen my friends from the Southern Refugee Legal Aid Network. But I also know that if we saw each other, that fire would still be very much in us, and we still care about what is the status of refugees in the global South and whether their rights are being respected. So yes, I think that's the beauty about the element of the fire, right? And you don't need a huge fire, you just need a spark to start building a community. But also I love that it's not like your community should have a raging fire for it to be incredible, because if you always have a raging fire, it will burn out quickly, right? You know, and also it will maybe attract so many more people, and those are the moments, you know, that get written in history. But I think that the most important, the more beautiful moments of a community, it's when it's just a small fire and people start kind of getting closer together, just enough to feel the heat of that shared purpose. I think that's when you have those super fans, those early, I guess, early adopters, if you will, of what a community feels like. So yeah, thank you for bringing this up, and also bringing back in memory just that early community that I participated in, where, hey, you know, I have forgotten about it.
Lovely. And I'm just going to pause quickly to see if any of my colleagues want to bring in anything else. And Greta, I saw a question on, like, you know, what about fires within fires? And I think we'll come to that in a moment. That's a really beautiful question and reflection.
Maybe, Fabian, if it's okay, I'll share one thing really
Please.
briefly. It's in the spirit of conversation, we did have a chance to sit with different elders and talking about some of the different teachings. So Lynn said beautifully about Chinese medicine and the heart and the fire. And I know in Anishinaabe with Elder John Rice, who is contributing, talked about Ishkwade being the first heart and coming back to the first heart. And so, yeah, I just thought I would mention that, a little element around centering some of our knowledges and our stories. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. And if you go on our website and click on the summary, you'll be actually able to hear some of these stories. There's voice recordings there, and we are looking to add more. If you feel like you or people in your circles carry like traditional knowledges, ancestral knowledges, indigenous knowledges, things that are not usually like that well also represented in the main dialogue, we'd love to weave that in. Michelle, would you like to, Michelle B, could you move us to the next slide? The web. For me personally, this is an incredibly important part of the community because I think of a community essentially as a web of relationships. It's what really holds us together. It's what kind of is there below the ground, just like how a mycelium connects a forest. We feel like the web of relationships is what connects a community and holds it together, what makes it strong. And as we look, if we think of a community essentially as relationships, we can ask ourselves, well, how can we strengthen these relationships? But also, what is the quality of these relationships that we want to give them? Do we want them to be about care or about trust or about safety or about courage or about, what is it really what kind of relationships do we want to embody and role model in our community? Inclusion is definitely something that comes up in the web, like who are the people who are not included, who are maybe not very well connected into the web, and how can we weave them more in? And then very often, conflict, tensions are a natural part of many community. And honestly, also many of our communities carry a lot of like traumas from past conflicts or systemic challenges that we've been part of. So what needs healing in our community? How can we make sure that the web in our community can heal and is healthy? Michelle, would you like to, I would love to bring in your voice.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I think this is probably my favorite element because when I think of the web, just like you're thinking about like this is where weaving really comes in, right? And when you think about weaving, it's something that when you start doing it, you have to do it very intentional. But if you observe, I guess like also in Ecuador, weaving is a very big part of the ancestral traditions, and when you see women that are weaving, just that you can also do it kind of like unintentionally too, like subconsciously, right? But it requires to be very very specific about which thread goes with which thread, and in this sense, what emerges in me when I think about it, it's just every single one of those connections being done at first very intentionally and very humanly possible, right? Connections can start with, these two people have the same thing in common or the same problem in common. But true connections, if you actually have done if you have actually tied the two threads together very well, then it's a very human connection. And I think understanding which thread can go with which beyond common interests is what can really weave a beautiful tapestry, a beautiful community. And the true test of that is when that tapestry can also hold you back, right? It won't fall apart when you put some weight on it. And I know that happened to me twice actually in this community weaving effort that I've been a part of here in Ecuador for almost 10 years. In the very early stages, we had these kind of like beautiful like community events when we got together, and we talked about our values and things, and and sharing these teachings. And one of these, this was an entrepreneurial, social entrepreneurship, environmental entrepreneurship community, and one of the things we shared was, okay, you have to pilot things. You have to stop thinking about your idea and then just try it out and experiment and go out into the world. And it was a beautiful thing when there was a point, maybe almost a year into into the moment of where we built the community, where the community came back to us and they said, hey, you need to practice what you preach. You tell us about this, but you're not doing this yourself for yourself. And it was that was the true test. The fact that they were able to bring this up, in this beautiful, caring way. They were not walking out. They were not, up in arms. They were just saying, hey, we want to observe that you're not really doing this, and this is affecting our community. We want to hold you so that you can actually go and try out and pilot these ideas you have. And that's when we started actually a co-working space, and knowing nothing about real estate business or entrepreneurship at all. But then it came back, 10 years later, when this intuition, I think that, it goes from being very intentional and being very mechanical into intuitive weaving. And this intuition actually gave us the idea that we needed to start closing circles within the community. And this was really important, because that's when, in my case, I was ended up being the CEO of the company that was also responsible for holding space for the community. We understood that my leaving, I wanted to leave, and I wanted to make it an intentional leaving. And but then we wanted to make sure that this leaving, my leaving the role, not be traumatic for the community, but rather we built a number of rituals and to model what closing a circle might look like, and what leaving this tapestry might also look like, so that it's soft and it's lovely, and it's not just a moment of snapping a thread out and everyone being not held. So I love that weaving, and of course holding the web as an element is a beautiful symbol with which we can understand how we are all threads within it, but also if you're the one doing the weaving, how to put that weaving to a test, and making sure that it holds you back. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. I don't know, I didn't want to get it too specific, because it's a very long story and we could be around the fire for a long time, but I hope that resonated with a lot of other people that are really actively weaving communities as well.
I love that specificity, and I think to bring it to the actual weaving, I think is really important to remember that. And there are so many traditions around weaving, I think, that we actually can learn from. Michelle B, could you move us on to the next slide? Also, Michelle, I got some like whispers in the back channel that you and I are running a little bit behind, so we might have to
get right into it. Absolutely.
The rhythm. When we looked at healthy communities, we saw that what is really important is just that things don't just happen once and then temper out, but that there is a regularity, a consistency, a heartbeat, that the rituals that are there that build kind of the collective identity, the collective memory, and the shared experience. Just like as we were hearing the drum at the beginning, as Erin was singing and playing, kind of it helps us to be in community together if we have that steadiness. And so the question is, how do we come together, and how do we come together in a regular basis? And what is not just a rhythm, but a healthy rhythm, It's easy to say you want to do something every week, but most of us cannot sustain that rhythm over a long time. And then how and where do we come together that allows us to be in this rhythm? These days, we have channels that allow us to be in a synchronous rhythm, but that is sustained over time. Michelle, over to you.
Yes, I mean, the one, I guess the one thing that I wanted to share about the rhythm, and I very much connected with Erin bringing us into this conversation with the drum, is that it feels like drumming also just takes this with rhythm, there's a science part and there's an art part, like it's an art and science. And the science has a lot to do with understanding the logic and usefulness of all the tools that you can use to bring people in. You know, that is definitely part of community weaving and really like the admin part of it, right? You're thinking about tech or social or ancestral tools that are at your disposal to offer the community that chance to have a heartbeat in time and space. But then there's the art part, which is a bit like dancing or drumming and really feeling within you. And it also has a lot to do with, good art takes trial and error, and having clarity of what you want the community to look like, but also following what they are trying to tell you in terms of rhythm, right? This is where people like me who have a spreadsheet mind, and loves analyzing data, can thrive and offer a lot of people in the community. But I also love diving deep into how often do I reach out, how many people have responded, how many views do we have of a certain tool that we've put out there, and that way I can start thinking of different rhythms that I can put out to the community to see if they dance back. Then of course I'll keep using it. But if they don't, or it doesn't resonate, or if it's too often or it's too fast or too intense, I can also step back. But if they're asking for more intensity, I can start playing that drum a little bit faster. And yes, and thinking about it as art makes it a little bit less admin type, yes.
Wonderful. On to the circles. When I used to think that my role as a community weaver was to make sure that all the people who are inactive in the community become active. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. And yet it never worked. And it felt like this never-ending struggle to run after people and to convince them, to push them, to convert them in terms of like marketing lingo. And I think what I would say has become clear in conversation and as we were developing is that most groups have 3 concentric circles at the same time. There is at the very core very few people, and I imagine most of you are probably those people at the core who make things happen in a group, who carry the group, who care for the whole of the group, and who make sure that the group is healthy. Around that is a middle core of people who are actively engaged, who show up to things, who put up their hands when you need a volunteer, but they don't usually are the ones who take on leadership. And then around that is a large circle of people who show up whenever they feel like showing up. And I think what we've come to realize and learn is that it is totally healthy to have all 3 of these elements at the same time. The question is how can we make sure that these are in the right relationship with each other? Big question there is around reciprocity. How do we make sure that the people who give a lot also are nurtured back? And this is not in the kind of a reciprocity in the sense of short-term tit for tat, I do this, I want something back, but just how do we make sure this is a mutual thing, that the people who put in a lot get something out? And how do we make sure we know how to make decisions together? How does power flow? And how do we really resource the people who actually are putting a lot of themselves in there? A lot of the community weavers we've seen or we know have burned out or are burning out because they just give so much of themselves. How do we take care of them? How are we intentional about that? Michelle, over to you.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. And I know that when I saw the first iteration of the circles, it took a huge load off my shoulders, because I felt the same as Fabiana. I was like, I gotta carry this whole thing on my shoulders and do it all. And then, and then when we started thinking about the the circles, I should call it, not only was it relieving for us, but it was also expansive. And maybe I'll focus more a little bit on my own experience when we started realizing the incredible power of the outside circles. Because it doesn't, you know, these are the people that are kind of curiously walking around trying to understand what's going on. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. And when we were feeling like, okay, that's fine, then you just kind of like, when you're relaxing to that's gotta be their role, then there's this energy that starts bringing them back again. And that's when we realized that we were able to, you know, their role was actually to bring in new people with whom we had never been connected before. So again, you know, this was a social entrepreneurship community. And then we started just connecting with, hey, you know, this person that came maybe once in a while started bringing some people that were migrant entrepreneurs. And then that's when we connected with the LGBTI community and you know, and what they were, why they would be interested in entrepreneurship, and also later with Indigenous youth activists and what entrepreneurship like had to do with their community. So in this particular drawing, and Lane, I think did a beautiful job there. There's, you know, this purple kind of like expansive, you know, color in the background. In my mind, I interpret it as, you know, as all the other communities and all the other possibilities that all the outside circles can and bring in. So yeah, don't ever forget about the magic of the outside circles.
Lovely. And then finally, the spiral. The notion of the spiral is very simple, and at the same time very magical and mysterious to me, which is that communities are not static things. They're not machines. They are living, evolving beings that are constantly changing. And not just are they collectively changing, we individually are changing too. And the question is, how do we create intentional journeys to bring people in, through, and then maybe also out of the community? But also, how does the actual evolution happen collectively? Like, how do we change? How do we journey as a collective? So there we've been thinking a lot about initiation. How do we new people come in? Transition, how to maybe people transition out? And how do we make sense as a collective where we want to go together? And Michelle, over to you. I was hearing that maybe we can quickly listen to Adrian and Michelle, just how we're doing time-wise, because I've been getting some messages that I haven't read, so.
I mean, overall, Fabian, this session ends in 15 minutes, and we had planned a little breakout session before for people to also share. Let's see if we still have time for that. But that's the time we have left for today, altogether.
Great. Michelle, over to you.
Great. Sure, I'll be brief, but I think that this closes it out really nicely, because you know, as you said, Fabian, the spiral is about your own individual journey, and then of course when that individual journey matches up with your community, then you're in this beautiful spiral together. But sometimes your life just, you know, spirals out. You grow out of it, or you grow in a parallel ways, or you take a different path. And I had mentioned earlier that within my own community, we had ideated a number of rituals to close out my transition out of the leadership of the organization. And I remember that within the process, so many people were sad about this cycle closing, which is all right. You know, we had shared so much. And many people were wondering out loud whether the community will go on without me. And the spirals are the best way to exemplify this, because my own individual journey brought me out of the center circle of the origins of my community. But once I stepped away, the community continued on to have its fire, very much burning, you know, in different ways, always dancing one way or another. But also my leaving was that test for it to go on, and it really has. So the reason why I'm sharing this is because thinking about this as spirals, just first of all opens the possibility of it going anywhere. But second, you know, if you wanted to have very practical, you want to have very practical ways for people to not just enter the community, but also to exit in a beautiful way. That really honors that path that we took together. So that's what I wanted to share. On to you, Fabian.
Thank you, Michelle. We'd love to go into breakouts from here and just give you all an opportunity to come into conversation. Like, how is that resonating with your experience actually working in community, with community? How is it resonating? And we'll have, I believe, like 7 minutes or 9 minutes. I think the magical gods and facilitators of Zoom will let us know. And enjoy your conversations, and we'll hear each other on the way out. Welcome back, everyone. This was probably way too short, but we hope this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it. I think I might be passing over to Michelle B to just take us towards the saying goodbye.
Almost. I think we have probably 1 or 2 minutes. I would just be curious because there's so much wisdom in this group. So if you could maybe, at least in the chat, just take a moment to share some of your resonance, questions, learnings, because then we can harvest that. Because for us, it's also really beautiful just to get some feedback as well, how that resonates. So if you could just, take a moment to write something you learned, you resonate. We don't really have time for voices, but at least that we have some written words in the chat, that would be really beautiful. And then, as you're doing this, and then Adrian, if you can then save the chat and send it to us, that would be amazing. So we make sure we harvest all this wisdom. And talking about harvesting, I wanted to highlight, one thing, and that is, I don't know if you've been on our website, communityweaving.org, you will notice that there's also a handbook. So a big part of this collective effort is that, these 5 elements, we hope will create some shared language. So it hopefully spurs a lot of conversation in different groups. But we also hope to collect resources, tools, practices. So if you have any practical resource you want to share about, how to nurture the fire, how to weave the web, what is a good rhythm, on this handbook page, you can also upload or some resource, and then we want to create some kind of a library out of that. So this is really an invitation to also join this and help us create some kind of resource library so that we collectively can learn together how to weave these communities most powerfully. And with that, I just want to quickly give the word to Adrian, who has some things to share about the Fito Festival in total before we close.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to all of you facilitating and speaking. It's been a very beautiful session. And of course, to all of you showing up and registering. I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of ways to engage with the festival. Like, this is still happening until the end of June. We have other amazing sessions like this coming up. And there's 3 specific invitations that you're invited to. First, we have a needs and offers market. So already over 100 people indicated what kind of skills, opportunities, jobs even they are offering or they are needing. And we are creating matches and a sense of abundance throughout the festival. And then the next thing, you can join into this in the chat. I put all of the links into the chat. If you want to stay connected, between the different sessions, you can join the Festival Arcade. We're playing some games there to connect with other amazing network and community weaving practitioners and funders and facilitators. So you can go into the WhatsApp group. And again, the link here is in the chat, and it will also be in a follow-up email that you receive from this session. And then lastly, we have an amazing lineup up next. So every week we're having between 3 or 5 of these sessions. So in the next slide, you can just shortly see all of the sessions coming up just next week. So if you're interested in how to build a social innovation network, how to cultivate communities of practice, if you're in migration networks and working with refugees, for example, if you want to tell stories to captivate your network members and funders, or if you want to dive deeper into how can we, do inner work and then bring that inner work into our relationships, there is sessions for that next week. And you're so welcome to come and play and connect and just, join this festivities of the Networks Festival 2024. Thank you so much again for the session and participating, and yeah, much love to all of you.
Thanks, Adrian. So we're on time, dot closing. So just a big thank you from all of us for your time, for being present, for sharing, and let's hopefully weave this together forward so that we can really have many, many fires across the world, tended fires, and weave this web together. Thank you so much. And you can unmute if you want to say goodbye, although we're a lot of people today, huh? Maybe
Goodbye.
waiting.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Goodbye.